What's going on, everybody? It's Joshua Cleary back with part 3 and episode 2 of our basic cinematography series. Today we're going to be going over what is going on in the lens of your camera. We got into the settings and how that will affect your image output, but today we're going to go look at what's happening really in the lens, how you can manipulate that and use it to your advantage to create cinematic video. So the first thing we'll talk about today is focal length. The focal length of your lens is the amount of distance that's between the lens and the actual sensor of your camera. Having a smaller focal length oftentimes will lead to the wider image. If you're shooting at a wide angle 15mm lens, 24mm lens, I'm shooting on a 35mm lens right now. I've cropped it down here for Instagram. If not on Twitter, you're seeing it really wide, but you can see that it creates a realistic proportion of me. There isn't really much distortion going, or one part of my body looks bigger than another, and we'll get into that later when we talk about lens compression. So first off, let's talk about focal length. Your focal length is the amount of distance between your lens and your camera's sensor. This determines the perspective of your image, how wide your image is, how tight your image is, and those things go into affecting your lens compression and bokeh, which we'll talk about later in this video. Determining what you want your focal length to be, whether that be something wide like a 35mm I'm shooting on right now, or if you're wanting a tighter image shooting maybe at 135 or on a 70-200 lens for sports, will determine the tightness of your shot, the amount of perspective you are able to have, and the overall image and cinematic look of your picture. So next, let's talk about lens compression. Lens compression, now, you're bringing some of the settings in your camera into play with the focal length of your lens. I shoot with a 70-200 for my sporting events, and that means whenever I'm zoomed in all the way to 200mm, oftentimes keeping my aperture, like we talked about last video, down around 2.8 to f4. If the subject is close enough to me and the background behind them, like I'm showing on screen now, is far enough away, you will generate the bokeh that we're about to talk about, creating separation between your subject and the background. This will oftentimes lead to that cinematic look that people are always looking for. So it's important that you are able to combine the focal length that you want with a lens that has the lowest aperture possible to create that separation between you and the background. So now that we have a good understanding of focal length and lens compression, we can really get into the details of what bokeh is all about. Bokeh refers to the blurry, out-of-focus portion of the image that you're seeing here in the background. That's created since I'm using a very wide aperture, the lower number. I'm at 1.8 right now. I know in some of the videos I've done in the past, you couldn't even really see my shirt sharply or the logos that were there, just because of how shallow a depth of field that image created since I was shooting at 1.8. Now, if I were to extend that and make everything in focus, if I shot at, say, f8, that would really decrease the cinematic look of the image that y'all can see right now and take away from the depth created. Now, getting a lens that has a wide aperture can be really expensive. This 35mm G Master lens from Sony was about $2,500, I think. And while that's a worthwhile investment for someone who's working full-time, it's not feasible for everyone who's just starting up. So, using the lenses that you have to your advantage, you can still create that bokeh that you want, but you just have to get a little bit more creative. When I was in high school, I had access to Canon 70D cameras. These were just basic DSLRs, like what people in schools still have today, and our lenses, we didn't have a lens that went down to 2.8. We didn't have a lens that went down to f4 even. These were all stock lenses that maybe were 24 to 105, ranging from f4 all the way up to 6.3 if you're zoomed all the way in. Whenever I was at 6.3, I'd often look at other people's work and be like, man, I just can't create that image that they have. But as time went on and I learned more about it, I realized that that is all really possible. Say you're shooting a high school football game and you're wanting to have a blurry background image. Getting closer to your subject while zoomed all the way in, if the field is outside, or even if you're playing basketball inside a gym, getting that subject up close while zoomed all the way in, if they're far enough away from the background, you can create that same look that you want. And that is really as easy as it is. And learning your settings, getting your ISO, getting your aperture, and getting everything that you want together to make your shot what it looks like, you have full creative control still, even if you might not have the most expensive materials. So I hope this video has given you an understanding on these three fundamental parts of your lens: the focal length, the lens compression, and how the bokeh is created from those two things. They all work together as one, and I think it's really cool on how, as a creative, by controlling the things you can control, the cinematic look of your image will just show up exactly how you want it. I'm excited to continue this series, and I look forward to next week when we're going to talk about image stabilization and what you can do to create that stable look, track shots the way you want to, and really put it all together into one piece, combining your lens, your camera body, and now putting it into your hands and getting out there and shooting some stuff. Looking forward to it, and I'll talk to you next time. See ya.